Yeah, and we're sort of asking everybody to just sort of pick their one sort of thing, or they can talk about one or two things. And I guess I would probably summarize mine by the phrase Boomeritis Buddhism. And that's just kind of, there's a technical term in there, Buddhism, that you might not understand. The Boomeritis, I know everybody's familiar with. The easiest way, in a sense, is sort of the popular version of what Patrick's talking about. Actually, I think a lot of people here are talking about the same thing, but it's certainly a popular version of what Patrick's talking about. And that is, if you look at any of the great, this applies not just to Buddha Dharma, but any of the great contemplative spiritual traditions, and you think about one of the really classic states of consciousness that virtually all of the great traditions have access to, and that is some sort of formless absorption in the vast emptiness, ayan, the ursprung, the ground, the great unborn, nirvikalpa samadhi. Now, most traditions maintain that's not necessarily the highest. There is kind of a non-dual move through that, where emptiness and form are seen to be not two. But these traditions also have that experience of just pure unmanifest absorption. So just use that as an example. When you're in that state, there are no mental concepts, there are no maps, there are no metaphors. That's fine. But when you come out of that state, which can be an experience not while you're in it, but as you start to come out of it, you realize that that is a vast, infinite freedom that you were just dunked into, that in some deep, deep sense is your primordial being. Now, how are you going to discuss that? And then all of a sudden you realize that the way you interpret that experience, the experience itself is what's important, but the way you interpret it is going to be almost as important in how it enters your life. So you're going to describe that as finding your Christ consciousness. Is it a Avalokitesvara? Is it Buddhist terms, Hindu? If you've never had any religious training at all, what are you going to call it? If you have this experience of divine illumination pouring down, love and bliss, all, how do you interpret that? Did it have 10,000 arms by any chance? Only 2? Probably a Westerner. So, all of a sudden, the interpretive maps that you have, it turns out they're not just ways you interpret it, they actually feed back into the experience and resonate with it and give it its tone and its flavor. It's no accident that in something like the Tibetan tradition, which is one of the most deeply developed contemplative traditions in the world, in many of these traditions, you'll spend up to half of your time each day, your training is intellectual debate. It's how best to interpret emptiness. That will actually color that taste of emptiness that you have, even though primarily it can be devoid of concepts. So all of a sudden we find that the interpretive scheme we have for these non-conceptual experiences becomes almost as important. And it's certainly important when you start to communicate it to the world at large. And so part of the difficulty, in my opinion, is that good-hearted, good-intentioned, smart people have reached for metaphors and models of these extraordinary meditative states, and many of these maps, models, and metaphors have just been really bad choices. They've been based on bad physics. They've been based on sort of a popular psychology. They've been based on types of systems theory that aren't even in vogue anymore. Again, good-intentioned, but bad metaphors, bad maps, and bad models. And one of the real difficulties is that we also find that if you're going through particular stages of development, and you're at a particular stage, Carol Gilligan has 4 main stages of female moral growth, which she calls selfish, care, universal care, and integrated. And let's say that you're a woman moving through these, and you're at the care stage. And you can have one of these profound experiences of formlessness. But when you come out, you can only interpret it according to the mental apparatus you have. And if you're at the selfish stage, you'll interpret it in a selfish way. I alone have this realization. Everybody else is fucked. Now, that might be true in some deep, profound sense, especially among a lot of my friends anyway. But you can see what happens, which is that all of a sudden, the stage you're at and the maps you have are almost as important as the spiritual experience itself. And so I think in large measure, what we're seeing is, again, good intentions, bad maps, or smart women, foolish choices, is one of the books out. And because of that, we get into just this kind of stuff in academia that Patrick's talking about. It's very similar to what Vid is talking about. And it's what Sally's talking about in a sense, because if you don't have a way that can integrate this into the world with adequate maps, then you're going to have the same problem. You're going to have this realization, and it's going to run smack into, as soon as you step outside the ashram, you have no bloody idea how it fits with the world out there. And so to me, it's all it's sort of encompassed in the phrase Boomeritis Buddhism, which is not to pick on boomers, or itis, for that matter. But it is to say that, to me, that would be sort of my one sentence problem, is that we had wonderful meditative and spiritual experiences and just not very good maps. So we're hoping to come up with a little bit more integral maps to help give resonance to these. And we hope those maps will also, because they're intentionally drawn with a modern and postmodern world in mind, will have an added benefit of showing how spirituality can fit into those worlds in a way that's compatible with all of them.